What is up, sports fans? My name is Jake Andrzejewski. You can call me Jake Iggy or Iggy for short. And this is Iggy's Sports Talk. So I have a very special guest on with me today, Ed Marinaro, who is a former NFL player and also the actor of Marty Daniels on Blue Mountain State. So how's your day going so far, Ed?
Doing good. Just finished playing 18 holes of golf down here in Charleston, South Carolina.
How'd you do?
Pretty good. I'm getting better.
There we go. That's all that matters. Well, I was curious because 2020 is starting to wind down, and I like to ask people this every time I have them on. How was your 2020? And even though it's an unprecedented time and sort of a tough year for everybody, I was just curious, what was your favorite memory so far of the year of 2020?
Well, fortunately, I haven't lost anybody close to me with coronavirus, which was a very good thing. And, it was obviously it was tough. It was tough for everybody. Yeah, I have a son who's 18 years old, who's a senior in high school, who's the quarterback football team here, Bishop England High School. And he's been, he was being recruited by several colleges, and the whole corona deal kind of threw a monkey wrench into the whole recruiting process. But we were fortunate. He got to play. We had his football season. He played 7 games, had a great season. So things are looking good as far as him playing at the next level.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I mean, it was very tough. I mean, for me as a senior in college, to have a few of my friends last year, obviously not get to play throughout their, playing career and also get everything cut short due to COVID. But it's great. It's great to hear that your son is able to find a way to go on to the next level.
Yep.
And so I want to ask you about first your time at Cornell, because just like looking at the stats, I couldn't believe all the records that you broke, 16 Ivy League and NCAA records. And so I was curious, like going into Cornell, what was your main focus going into the NFL?
Not at all. When I was pretty heavily recruited coming out of high school, I had probably, maybe 40 football scholarships to some big colleges to play college football. But I always even at a young age, I knew going to a school like Cornell, an Ivy League school, would serve me well later in life. I wasn't thinking about playing in the NFL. Everything that happened to me in college was a surprise. But, it was one of those situations. I was just in the right place at the right time. I had a great team. And, it just happened. It was a surprise. I went from, really just being one of the guys on the team. I think my 4th varsity game, we couldn't play as freshmen, but my 4th varsity game, we played Harvard. We were 21-point underdogs, and I gained 281 yards and scored 5 touchdowns. And that was an Ivy League record for yards and an Ivy League record for touchdowns. It was my 4th varsity game. My first 4 games of my varsity career, I had gained over 800 yards. So I was averaging 200 yards a game for the first 4 games. It was, I never expected that to happen. I never thought about the NFL until probably when I was named All-American as a sophomore. I knew that I'd get a shot, even as a free agent. I didn't know whether I'd get drafted or not. It was kind of sort of a healthy, natural evolution for me. I didn't get ahead of myself. It's what I tell my son. I said, stay in the moment. Don't look too far ahead. Enjoy what's going on now. And if it's meant to be, it'll happen. So, it was rather overwhelming because, for Cornell, they had never had a player like me. I mean, I don't think the Ivy League had a player like me in its history. I was voted the player of the era.
I saw that
in the 90s. So that was kind of cool. So it was. I think I surprised a lot of people. I mean, I think I made a lot of people proud. Even a lot of the teams I played against. It's still a very close-knit group, the Ivy League, and I'm friendly with several guys I played against. At Dartmouth, at Yale, at Harvard. So it's kind of a great fraternity to be in, and I know they're proud I did. Even now, when I go up to Cornell, all these young players, they're sort of they can't avoid my name and on the walls. They had a statue of me there and all that stuff. But they know me more as Coach Marty Daniels than they do as a football player. So.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, so it must be pretty cool, or it must have been pretty cool, obviously, in the moment. Like you, as you said, you didn't. Your main goal wasn't to go to the NFL, and once you started realizing or showing people how good you actually were, I was curious. Just throughout your time at Cornell, did you start getting a lot of publicity just around your peers, and when you walked around campus, did sort of people know who you were, or?
Yeah, I mean, again, in the Ivy at the time. It was Ivy League football, and it wasn't like guys go to Ohio State. We didn't have. I mean, we sold out my senior year. When I was on the verge of setting the national rushing record, more of the student body would come to the games. I got a lot more publicity, but it was. It wasn't like I was at Notre Dame. So that was still kind of cool, and then. My senior year, I was in the cover of Sports Illustrated, which was kind of a neat deal. I mean, that's one of the great honors that I've ever had. I mean, I look back and that, it's kind of rock star being on the cover of the Rolling Stone. Being on the cover of Sports Illustrated is a pretty neat deal. That kind of, everybody at Cornell. Not everybody, but they knew I was around. They knew this kid was making all kinds of headlines and stuff like that. So it was very heady stuff for a 20, 21-year-old kid. It was hard to handle. Way I mean I no one ever is prepared to all of a sudden have people recognize you when you walk into the student cafeteria.
100%.
You and you're on campus, so that was kind of you had to really I had to work hard to keep myself grounded and not get too caught up in all that stuff. But I was a real up for the Ivy League or the East Coast, the Northeast, with all the I was getting headlines along with Penn State and places like that. So it was fun, but it happened so fast. It was a blur. It's only when you look back now that you can kind of appreciate it. But at the time, I was trying to graduate from college. I was trying, I was thinking about the NFL at that time. After my senior year, I knew I was going to get drafted, and so that was something that I was thinking about. What team I would go to, and it was crazy, but it was fun.
Yeah, I was curious. Like when you went into the draft, like did you have any teams in mind before you got drafted?
Well, one of the last teams that I wanted to go to was the Minnesota Vikings, and they drafted me. So, I'm a New York guy, New York, New Jersey. I grew up being a Giant fan, and then I was a Jet fan. When I thought about the NFL, I thought about going to a big city, like going to the Rams, playing LA or even San Francisco. And I didn't even know if Minnesota was in the United States. So, to get drafted, get that call on draft night, congratulations, you're a Minnesota Viking. My first thought was how they had to have flamethrowers melt the field because it was so cold up there. When I was there, I played to this day, I played in two of the coldest games in NFL history.
Wow.
Back the seventh and eighth coldest game in NFL history. It was 35 below zero.
Wow.
So, and our coach, Bud Grant, didn't allow heaters on the sidelines. We just stood out there. It was crazy.
Could you catch the football?
Boy, it was like self-defense. It was rough. I mean, when you're in the game, it wasn't terrible. But if you were standing on the sidelines and they sent you in for a play, that was brutal. Not fun.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, like I said, I go to Plymouth State University, and it's 70 degrees out right now, but I'm so used to the 30-degree weather, so I know what you're saying. But so like you said, you got drafted by the Vikings in 1972, and then in 73 and 74, you went to back-to-back Super Bowls. What was that experience like? And sort of, were you pretty surprised that, I mean, you said that you didn't want to go on the Vikings, so were you pretty surprised that they were able to get there 2 years in a row?
Well, you got to remember this. I played Super Bowl 8 and 9.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's Super Bowl, I don't know, 52, 53.
Yeah.
And the Super Bowl has certainly changed. It's become a national holiday, I think. Back then, it wasn't, the magnitude wasn't there. So, and we didn't make a whole lot of money. It was kind of cool. Again, looking back at it, to say that I played in 2 Super Bowls is pretty cool. But at the time, it was, it was another game, and it just wasn't like it is today, where, it's a week long, doing interviews and going to Disneyland and all that crap. It was just another game. And, it was, we lost both of them, which was a little disappointing, but, I could always say I went to 2 Super Bowls, but, it's not nearly a game. It wasn't the same kind of game. It wasn't this grand event that it is today.
That's interesting. And sort of like when you left the Vikings, you brought up how you were a Jets fan and a Giants fan growing up. What was your feeling like when you were able to sign with the New York Jets and sort of have like a childhood dream come true?
It was exciting. I played. I actually was in the first group of guys, true free agents in the NFL. That one year, there was a lawsuit against the NFL. It was called the Rozelle Rule, where if you couldn't leave and go to another team, if you did, the other team would have to compensate you some ridiculous amount of money. 2 first-round draft picks. It was totally. They just didn't want you to go from team to team.
Right.
But that year, I left the Vikings, went to the Jets. John Riggins, I don't know if you remember John Riggins, great Hall of Famer for the Jets. He went to the Redskins. There were about 6 of us who became free agents. And so Joe Namath has been a friend of mine since I was in college. I met him. He's one of my good friends. He was just a great guy and very supportive of me. He kind of helped orchestrate the move to the Jets. And unfortunately, I got injured in the 7th game of the season, Monday Night Football against the Patriots, and I was actually coming off 2 back-to-back 100-yard rushing games with the Jets, and finally they were letting me run the ball. In Minnesota, I was primarily a pass receiver and a blocker, 2 things I never did in college, which was, when I look back, I don't know why they even drafted me, because they didn't think I could run with the ball. But anyway, when I went to the Jets, I got my chance, and I proved to myself that, given the ball, I could gain yards. And then I got hurt, and that was pretty much the end of it. I signed, I got released the next year, and then I got signed by the Seattle Seahawks the last 7 games of that season. The coach for the Seahawks was the defensive line coach for the Vikings when I was there, so they signed me, and I didn't play. Then they offered me another contract, but this was only the 2nd year of the Seahawks. 77, they started 76, so 77 was the 2nd year. I thought I'd be better off going to a team that needed a veteran running back. Ironically, I was very durable, never got hurt. Then I got that one injury in my career. So I went and I signed with the Chicago Bears in 78, went to training camp with them. Walter Payton, one of the running backs.
That's cool.
And they released me. I was one of the last cuts, and then I pretty much said that was it, I'm done, and I moved to Hollywood.
That makes sense. And sort of like when you retired, like you said that you went right to Hollywood. So was your intention to become an actor right after you retired?
Yeah, I had studied when I had studied acting in L.A. after I left the Vikings in 75, and during that off season I signed with the Jets, but I moved out to L.A. and I got into an acting workshop, and I studied acting for probably 3 months. I was working out and getting ready for the season. And then when I went to New York, I got an acting workshop for I'd go once a week. And then I got hurt, and then I sort of put acting on the side for a while, trying to get myself back, in shape again. And then when my career was over, I pretty much, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I just moved out there. I had an agent already. I had my Screen Actors Guild card, so it was a little easier for me. But it didn't happen right away. It took me a couple of years to get a decent role. And, I got lucky with a couple of things. And I was out there for 40 years.
That's awesome. And I wanted to ask you, obviously, you had multiple roles. You were in a show called Blue Street Blues, or Hill Street Blues, excuse me, Laverne and Shirley. And I was curious, during those first, and also Sisters as well, that show. But I was curious as well, before Blue Mountain State, what was your experience like trying to find roles in Hollywood? And you said it took you a few years to be able to find anything. I was just curious your experience out there.
Well, you know what? I had a bit of advantage because people, producers and casting people, they kind of knew who I was, but I wasn't like Joe Namath or one of those kind of people. So, they really weren't going to give me a role. I had to sort of be right for a role, and they weren't going to exploit my name. So, and I think looking back, that was probably a good thing, because when I did get, my first few jobs, it was more as an actor than an ex-football player. And I think that's what served me well, throughout my career. Hill Street Blues was, at the time, the most honored TV show in history. I mean, we were nominated for Emmys. It was a breakout kind of show, very gritty, unlike anything that was on TV at the time. We had like Charlie's Angels and Chips, and then along came this gritty show where they were, about real. It was about cops who were people, and they explored the person of these cops, and law enforcement loved the show. They loved us. They still do. People from that era, and that was sort of gave me instant credibility in Hollywood. They forgot that I was a football player. It was, they were considering me as an actor. So that was good. That was very satisfying to be part of a cast of really, really talented people. And here I was, 3 years out of the NFL. So.
Yeah, that must have been a pretty cool sort of experience for you. It was kind of funny as well. When I actually told my mom that I was talking to you today, she actually brought up the show Hill Street Blues. She's like, "Oh, I actually remember him in the show." And then when I told all my friends, like, "Oh, Marty Daniels, I love him."
Well, that's a good thing. That one thing that's kind of unique, that at this stage in my career, my fan base, if you will, goes back to the 80s, and now I have a whole different set of group, like crazy guys like you, who love Marty Daniels, love Blue Mountain State. I mean, I probably recognize. Well, remember back when Hill Street Blues was on, there were only 3 networks. There was no such thing as cable. There was ABC, CBS, and NBC. And if you weren't watching Street Blues at Thursday night at 10 o'clock, you only had 2 other options in the local news.
Right.
So it was the exposure was pretty intense, but you couldn't binge watch the show. It was on once a week, and you had to watch it when it was on. And then they had all these different. You could record it, whatever, but not what you could do today.
Right.
And it was very different. And then when over the years everything evolved, and here we are in the 2000s, and they put Blue Mountain State on Netflix, and it was introduced to a whole different audience of kids who couldn't watch it when it was first on. These like my son, all his friends were like, 7, 8 years old when the show was on. And then, now they're like 16, 17 in high school,
right.
and they're binge watching it on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a whole different audience
right.
that I deal with today, which is kind of fun. My from Blue Mountain State, the range of fans is probably 16, 30.
Makes sense.
Because the kids who were in college when the show was on,
mm-hmm.
that was 10 years ago. So they're 30 years old and older. And it's funny because they come up to me all the time, and it's like, it was such a cult following, had a cult following, and every kid, who college. I mean, I've had people. Do you remember? Ever hear of a golfer, Michelle Wee?
Unfortunately, I haven't.
Okay, she's a really fine LPGA golfer. Very popular. And I remember years ago, I was playing in a pro-am, LPGA pro-am, and she was my partner, and I was all excited about playing with her, and I go up to the first tee, and she comes up to me, and she goes, "I was so excited when I heard I was playing with you."
Oh my gosh!
I watched that show with the football players because she went to Stanford. We watch every Tuesday night.
Yep.
She said, "Would you take a picture with me?" I wanted my picture with her.
Right.
So it really has been a lot of fun, with this fan base of. I don't think they could make the show today because it was, it was very. It was crazy. There was drug use. The women. Although if you looked at the women on the show, they usually got the best of all those dumbos that
mm-hmm.
the football players. They
yep.
came off like a little bit, they were being used and abused. They were abusing us more
right.
than we were abusing them. So that was kind of a subtle difference. But the drug use was over the top, and I think I think that's one of the reasons we didn't do a second movie, because we were all set to go.
Mm-hmm.
It just. I was under contract. I knew what they signed me to a deal to do this movie, and then radio silence, never heard about it. And I think it was because, it just wouldn't, everybody was afraid of being, attacked for political incorrectness.
Makes sense.
The drug use, and
mm-hmm.
that was opioid epidemics really started, so they couldn't very well have guys their face in a bowl of cocaine, on television.
Right.
It was funny, but it was farcical, but it just things in the last 3 or 4 years. I think our society has pretty much lost its sense of humor because everybody's so sensitive about everything. You can't laugh at yourself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different world. I'm glad, I'm an old guy, and I'm going off into the sunset, enjoying my life. So, it's a different world.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. That's another reason why I don't think The Office would be able to be aired as well.
No, yeah, there are a lot of shows that,
mm-hmm.
that you look back. I mean, hell, you could find a reason to ban the repeats of so many shows
mm-hmm.
that were on in the last 10 years. And, I guess, you used to be able to laugh at yourself a little bit and not take everything so seriously. But, I understand it, and there's got to be changes. But it's, it just changes. We're just, we're too serious about everything, and I understand where there's issues and have to be addressed. But, you can't be so extreme that nothing is funny anymore. And nothing is funny unless it's mean-spirited funny.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
And I was curious, like when you heard about the show and when you heard about the role Marty Daniels, like when you read about it, did you sort of laugh at yourself and you were like, is this actually serious? Like this is going to be a show?
You know what? I got to tell you, I was. Most actors will tell you, comedy. You really want to do comedy. Comedy's fun. Doing the comedy when you're actually working and doing it is fun. Drama is not fun.
mm-hmm.
It's drama.
Right.
So but when you do it in a comedy, you're having fun doing it, and you're trying to not to laugh when you're doing it, and it's so absurd that it's just fun to do, and everybody wants to do comedy. So when I read this and I saw the coach, and I can't even remember what I thought. When I read the script, it just that opening speech that I do in the pilot, where you come from your father's balls and stuff. It's just, I'm oh my God. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking my mother will not be able to watch it. People, my family, it was so raunchy.
Right.
That, I felt like I was doing, I thought I was doing like some porn at times. But it was a ball. We had a great time, and I'm glad. I feel very fortunate that I got a chance to do it, and it was a good gig, and I'm just sorry it ended. I'm gonna go over here. My phone is gonna die, so I'm gonna plug in.
No problem.
Yeah, so it was.
Oops.
Now that, again, you have the streaming networks. I think it's on Amazon Prime now. So
Right. Well, yeah, it's funny how you brought up the whole binging part of it, because the first week of my freshman year, I binged it in 3 weeks with some of my friends. And then we watched the movie right after. They're like, "Oh, you haven't seen the movie?" I'm like, "There's a movie?" But it's funny how you brought up how you had a great time being able to film it. And I was curious, sort of like your relationships outside of the show, working with some of the big characters who played, like Alex Moran, Thad Castle, and also Sammy as well.
You know what? It was again when we shot the show in Montreal,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a great place. I mean, it was great. We got to go up there for 3 months a year. We went June, July, and August. Being out of our normal environs, not being in LA, it was an escape, which sort of added to the the fun part of it, and we became very close because we were we were out of the country and we were all together. So that was that made it a little bit more special. But these guys, they're there. I still communicate with them. I'm living down in Charleston, South Carolina now, and they're all in LA. They're still young guys working at their careers and stuff. And we've done a couple of virtual kind of autograph shows and stuff like that. So
That's cool.
We get to catch up, and they're great guys, and they always make fun of me because I'm the old one, but used to that. But yeah, it was a good group. We had great producers and great writers. I mean, it was a funny show. I mean, there was some crazy, but it was also very clever, and clever is a word you hear a lot. I mean, you hear the word, but you don't know what it means. And some of this stuff was just so freaking funny that even somebody like me, and it wasn't targeting my demographic. It was, I look back at it now. I haven't watched it in a long time, but I know my son. He watch it, and some of the stuff we so funny, just clever funny. Where it was great.
I gotta ask you about the oil change, because like once you saw that in the script, like what was your first thought? Like now, anytime I think about like athletes getting tested, like that's the way to get out.
Well, that's the kind of thing that was absurd. It was absurd what they were doing, and it was just funny. I mean, it's just funny stuff, and it resonated with the audience it was meant to target. These college kids back then thought. I mean, I think college kids today, this show was on 10 years ago, and college kids just loved it.
Mm-hmm.
College kids today love it. It just hasn't changed. It's sort of like it's kind of like Seinfeld.
I agree.
I watch episodes of I get on my different feeds. They always have little funny scenes that they do from Seinfeld. Little 2 or 3 minutes. I watch them because I remember how funny it was. You know, you never get tired of watching it, and I think Blue Mountain State is going to be something that, you know, if you, it's something that you'll love for the rest of your life. You'll laugh at that up, and you'll remember. You know, it'll bring back memories to a whole generation. It was such a cult show, but you know, I'll give you an example. I have a friend whose son played on the South Carolina club. I think it was the lacrosse team, and he asked me. My buddy asked me if I would do a video, a pep talk for the team, South Carolina lacrosse team, and they were in Clemson. So I did the whole Marty Daniels thing, you're playing Clemson Tigers, huh? How about the Clemson Pussies? You know, like the whole thing. And they posted it on Instagram, and it got 2.5 million views.
Wow.
And 6,000 comments. Now,
wow.
That's crazy for a guy like, you know, who's all these young kids. I mean, it shocked me that, you know, it was it was just strange again that this would kind of resonate so strongly with this generation, and you know, it's pretty cool. It's just,
I completely agree with you. I mean, because like, even when I told a few of my friends that I was going to be talking to you today, they're like, "How?" They're like, "No way!" And like, even it was funny enough. I was actually at the bar when you connected with me on LinkedIn, and I like freaked out. I was like, "Oh my God, Marty Daniels just connected with me on LinkedIn. This is incredible." Well, I also didn't only want to hear about Blue Mountain State. I was really also curious about your NFL career as well, because me myself, I honestly didn't know that you used to play in the NFL.
Yeah, I know. Most people don't. No. The fan base, you know, when I went up to Cornell and I emceed their awards banquet, and you know, they knew a little bit about my career, but they didn't know I played in 2 Super Bowls. They didn't know any of that stuff. They just wanted a picture taken with Marty Daniels. So, yeah, no, it's. You know, I'm schizophrenic. But you know, the NFL was. Fortunately, I had another career that I did very well in, and you know, the NFL. You're obviously you have a very short lifespan in the NFL, so I'm glad I was able to do something again that was, you know, as ego gratifying as playing in the NFL, you know, maybe more so, you know, and you know, whatever my be, you know, it's I'm proud of it. I had 2 different careers that were successful, the careers that are not easy to be successful in, you know, and look back that, you know, I graduated from an Ivy League college. I played in 2 Super Bowls, and then I went and had a whole separate 40 years. And, you know, it's personally satisfying when I reflect back at, you know, my life and, you know, what I've done. I'm pretty proud of it. You know, I know my son is proud, you know, of what I've done, even though he doesn't show. He's you know, it's good. It's satisfying. I have no complaints, and I'm.
Yeah, I mean, it seriously has been an incredible journey for you. I mean, even when I was explaining to my friends sort of like what you did at Cornell with all the records you broke, they couldn't believe it. But I just wanted to ask you one last question just about Blue Mountain State. I was just wondering if there was any scenes during your time acting throughout the show that were very tough for you to go through. Either you couldn't stop laughing, or it was just such a funny scene.
Well, I think one of my favorite scenes was when I got to make out with Denise Richards. That was kind of fun.
There you go. I bet.
No, you know, it was you know, we did a lot of football stuff on the field, which was kind of fun to orchestrate again. And you know, I served as a technical advisor on a lot of the stuff. You know, you know, they wouldn't do better. This is what do it and stuff like that. And that was kind of fun. But just being out there on the football field kind of brought back memories, which was kind of cool. Obviously very different than when I was playing football, just the way that the game is coached and played. And so I had to kind of get myself more familiar with what a college football coach would be today as opposed to when I was playing, and the way the game, approach to the game was different. And, I wasn't one of those spoiled football players. Even in the NFL, I mean, when I played in the NFL, when I played for the Vikings, at the beginning of the season, they would give you one pair of shoes. And if you wanted another pair, you had to pay for them.
That's crazy.
It's crazy because every player and every freaking team probably has 30 pairs of shoes in his locker.
Right.
And we had 2. So it was like that. That's ridiculous when you think about it. We weren't bait. We didn't make a lot of money, and I think that was a good thing, because if you look at our generation, the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, these guys all knew that when their careers were over, they'd have to get a job.
Mm-hmm.
The great thing about being a player in the NFL was it made it easier for you to get a job because people wanted to hire an ex-NFL football player.
Right.
Okay? But we didn't have that money where we knew we were done. I wasn't making $10 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
So it really was very different. And I played against guys and with guys who went on to be doctors and lawyers. And Alan Page is a Minnesota Supreme Court justice. He's in the Hall of Fame. So guys were motivated in a different way back then. And it was the greatest generation, sure, when NFL. Guys, the one thing, the most valuable asset you had was your reputation and goodwill. And if you did something stupid, like got arrested or got busted for something, you were pretty much, no one would hire you. So you were very protective of that stuff. And you didn't see a lot of guys doing the stupid, crazy do today.
Right.
Certainly guys mismanage their money, but for the most part, we make enough money to mismanage. So, we were much more conservative. Nobody was driving Maserati. I pulled up to Minnesota with a purple Porsche.
Oh, shit. There you go.
Which blew the minds of the guys with their pickup truck station wagon.
Right.
It was a different time. I'm proud to have played in that era, and you can understand why guys, the old timers have a little bit of difficulty relating to the players today and their attitudes and whatever. They feel very entitled, and I'm just shocked with the stuff that these guys do to jeopardize all this money, and they're.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for me, it's very interesting to hear sort of your experience from the different times. I mean, mainly sort of what you talked about with the difference of how popular the Super Bowl is. And I had no clue that that the Super Bowl that you played in, you said was like Super Bowl 8 and Super Bowl 9. And also, like what you said about the free agency, I had never heard of that before. So it's really interesting to hear about the differences. That, especially how the NFL that you played in and now that we're watching right now.
Yeah. I mean, again, being an NFL player just gave you an advantage when your career is over to get a job. But everybody can get a job. We had guys who worked during the season. They would go to the job in the morning and then come to practice in the afternoon. Our kicker, Fred Cox, was a chiropractor. And he would come around before the games and knock on our rooms at the hotel and give us adjustments.
Wow.
It was crazy. And, people worked selling cars. So we had to be, we were normal people. We didn't live in big mansions. My first apartment in Minnesota was $185 a month. And, yeah.
That's super interesting. Wow. I mean, I didn't know any of this before, and you know, I really appreciate you coming on the show, Ed, and really taking the time to not only talk about your NFL career, your experiences, also with the differences between the NFL back then and now today, but also explaining your experience on Blue Mountain State as well.
Well, I'm glad. It's nice to meet you. I admire your tenaciousness to get in, contact. I like to, it's always fun to talk to people like you, who are working really hard at something, and I hope you're going to be successful. I'm sure you will. Just don't forget about me when you become really famous.
Definitely not. Never.
Never. All right, buddy boy.
I really appreciate you coming on, and I wish the best of luck to your son as well in college, and I hope to hear his name over the microphone at the podium at the NFL draft soon enough.
All right, well, I hope so too. All right, buddy.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.